Now available in paperback. Those who refuse the gift of eternal life are condemned to wander in the darkness of eternal night. Get your copy of Eternal Night at online booksellers today. Ryan Coogler's Sinners is the highest-grossing original film since Christopher Nolan's Inception. And the critical question I have to ask Hollywood, are they going to start greenlighting more horror films that feature black culture and predominantly black cast? Or are they going to look to try to sabotage the burgeoning market the same way they did with the black fantasy market when Black Panther was shown to be the #1 movie of 2018? Now, Hollywood itself has been in a major slump even before the pandemic started. Now, coming out of the pandemic, Hollywood has had the worst 5 years in its history since the period of the late 1960s and 1970s when we were in the middle of the Vietnam War. And as we were in the Vietnam War, Hollywood continued to try to go out here and produce all of these World War II movies, epic movies, and musicals, and the audience's taste had completely changed. And as the audience taste had changed, basically Hollywood didn't know where to go until independent filmmakers like the late Tom Laughlin, who created the biker film Born Losers, and the late Melvin Van Peebles came out with Sweetback's Badass Song, basically showed the direction Hollywood needed to go in as related to its films, and that's how we got the start of the era of New Hollywood. Now, Hollywood is in a similar situation with its movies these days, with all these big budget movies as related to the Marvel Cinematic Universe bombing at the box office, and aging intellectual properties like Star Wars not catching on with new generations of audiences. And when I look at Ryan Coogler's Sinners, it basically reminds me a lot of the late Melvin Van Peebles' Sweetback's Badass Song in showing us the direction that Hollywood needs to go in. However, when it comes down to the studios, I have to ask that critical question once again. Are they willing to go out here and start greenlighting movies that feature predominantly black cast and focus on black culture? Or are they gonna again try to sabotage the marketplace by again looking to try to avoid dealing with the change in the marketplace the way they did with 2018's Black Panther? Because when I look at the marketplace from my place as studying the entertainment industry for the last over 25 years, it's clear to me where I see the direction that the studios need to go in. However, because we have a lot of racists in the media arm of white supremacy, they don't want to go in that direction. And because they don't want to go in that direction, what they want to do is deny how the marketplace has changed and where the audience is right now. Now, I can tell from the success of films like Black Panther and Sinners that there is a growing black fantasy market and a growing black horror market, and that growing black fantasy market and black horror market basically is a base where Hollywood could basically get a lot of profitability for its business. However, many of the studio heads basically these days are not understanding where they're to go as related to the money because of the consolidation and corporatization of media due to the Telecom Act of 1996 and due to the corporatization and the technicization of the studios since the Telecom Act of 96. We don't have seasoned studio executives running these studios to basically look at the trends. No, we've got a lot of accountants and bean counters and tech nerds in charge, and they basically want a guarantee for success. However, their attempts to continue trying to get a guarantee for success from the MCU or Marvel Cinematic Universe and big budget children's movies like those made at Pixar basically isn't paying off. Moreover, the efforts to try to make the girl boss a staple of films has completely failed, and many of these studio heads now are continuing to try to greenlight these type of films, even though they fail at the box office. Not understanding the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. And it's clear to me that based on the trend of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, there's definitely a market for a black horror movie and an entire genre of black horror movies. And any smart studio executive like we had back in the day would be seeing the success of Sinners and going out here and picking up the phone and calling up guys like Kevin Grevue right now to buy whatever films that he has produced so far and get them immediately into distribution. Moreover, they would be contacting guys like me who write horror stories and getting on the phone with a guy like me hoping to buy the rights for a story like Eternal Night, because they would want to go out here and look to capitalize on this growing market by offering properties that they basically could go out here and present on the screen immediately for production. That's what a smart studio executive would be doing. But sadly, with today's Hollywood, a lot of these folks who are running these studios, again, a lot of them have tunnel vision, and a lot of them basically are racist, who really don't want to see black people coming into the studio space. They don't want to see black people coming into the studio space. One, because they don't want to go out here and have the black image be representative of an entire genre of film like horror. Two, they don't want to see black creators coming into the space and having a clear vision and telling stories from a black perspective, unless they go out here and are part of the cabal like Oprah Winfrey, Lee Daniels, and Tyler Perry. And three, they don't want to see black people building wealth inside of Hollywood. These are the reasons why many of the studios are not looking to tap into this growing and burgeoning audience for black horror the way they do black fantasy. Again, when it came down to the success of Black Panther, it was pointing in the direction, showing studio executives what direction they needed to go in. I mean, Black Panther was the #1 movie of 2018, basically sold almost all of its merchandise, and Hasbro insisted on making a series 2 and showed us the direction, again, Hollywood needed to go, and showed us that there was a hungry audience of black customers and non-black customers and customers all over the world who wanted to see stories that featured black fantasy. However, Hollywood, instead of looking to capitalize on the trend by going out here and contacting black creators like myself and many others out here, what they did instead was look to sabotage the entire black fantasy market by going out here and presenting the Oprah Winfrey production of A Wrinkle in Time, which bombed at the box office because it was poorly executed. And then we had Black Panther Wakanda Forever, again, a project that basically stumbled because people really didn't see that you needed to, again, put this project on hold after the passing of Chadwick Boseman, and then recast T'Challa later on after people had grieved his performance. Now, this is something that they should have done as related to a strategy to basically, again, ensure that you would be able to build an audience for Black Panther, and again, do the Black Panther sequel, and again, focus on some actual villains and show Black Panther and in his space, being defined as a hero. That would have been a great strategy to, again, build on the fantasy market, not to mention contacting, again, other black creators like myself and many others. Again, the market is there, the box office is there, but unfortunately, when it comes to the studios, they don't want to go where the customer is going, and they don't want to go where the customer is going, I believe, because the customer is black. And that was shown to me with the success of Sinners. I mean, when I see these studios and they see something being a blockbuster, almost immediately what those studio execs used to do back in the day was say, hey, we got to make more of this type of material. We got to go out here and find these type of scripts and these type of creators. And we got to find these type of creators immediately so we can go out here and capitalize on the trend. But I don't see many of these studio executives acting as eagerly as they did when films like The Godfather became popular and Star Wars became popular. I mean, when The Godfather became popular, we saw a whole lot of films about organized crime and life during that time of the 1920s and the 1930s, again being greenlit almost immediately. And when Star Wars became popular, we saw a lot of these sci-fi films basically being rushed into production. However, with the success of Sinners, you don't really see many of these studio execs running out here to contact a black creator like myself who has a property that is just like Sinners. I mean, with Eternal Night, it basically is just like Sinners. It has a lot of the Christian themes as related to horror. It's revolving around vampires and revolving around vampire culture and vampire lore in the black community in Harlem. Again, Eternal Night basically is, again, a film in the same style and genre as Sinners. Again, an easy IP that could be easily greenlit and put into production. However, ain't nobody contacting me regarding Eternal Night. Many of them I don't even think know about Eternal Night. But the whole thing is that it shows how many of Hollywood's studio executives are basically, again, looking to try to avoid seeing the direction that the audience wants to go in. It's clear to me that the audience wants films that are in the horror genre that feature black culture and black casts. However, many of the studio execs just don't want to greenlight that type of material, again, because they don't like the idea of a black creator controlling the image of black people. They don't like the idea of a black person going out here and telling a story from black culture that has not been greenlit by the media arm of white supremacy and approved by the narrative of white supremacy. They don't want something that doesn't fit their narrative, because Sinners did not fit their narrative, and they definitely don't like the idea of giving money to a foundational black American about presenting a story that is showcasing black culture. And what they really don't like is the idea of a black film basically telling a story about black people, and again, it gaining an audience internationally all over the world. This is another issue that many of the white studios have. They really have that issue. They don't like the idea of a black story becoming popular globally, because Sinners basically refuted the Hollywood narrative that they presented, refuted the entire narrative where they sat there and said, hey, these black films do poorly in the global box office, but here we have Sinners performing very well, not only in the United States, but also performing very well abroad. And that's basically shattering the whole racist narrative that black films do poorly in foreign countries. And I know that to be a lie, because I have books that do very well outside of the United States. I mean, books that are in the same type of genre that Sinners in, like Eternal Night, like books like The Temptation of John Haynes, many of the ISIS series and Esteem series books. Again, there's an audience for black characters in the horror, science fiction, and fantasy genre, but many of the white studio executives who are there right now, many of them are these tech nerds and comic fans. Again, they really don't want a black character to be dominant in this space. And it really reminds me of a lot of what happened in 2004 with the Static Shock show. Now, Static Shock was the #1 cartoon on Kids WB. It was a huge hit. And basically every other show that had lower ratings, like Jackie Chan Adventures and many other shows, had toy lines. But Static Shock didn't get a toy line, and even with his connections to the DC universe, he didn't get any sort of merchandise or action figures. I mean, the companies, the only fixed static figure we got was the DC Direct static figure in the DC, I think, Icons line, and that figure is passive-aggressively made to be way shorter than other figures. I mean, you have a character who, again, was #1, but they couldn't get a toy line out, and again, just shows me how racist these spaces are as related to black characters. Again, and I see that happening here once again. Again, the trend basically with Static was showing there was a marketplace for a black character as related to being an animated property that could be popular, but nobody wanted to capitalize on it because they didn't like the idea of a black person's image representing as a lead character. And the same things happened with Black Panther in 2018. The same thing is happening in 2018 with Black Panther as related to these studios not looking to capitalize on the growing fantasy market, not looking to capitalize on how popular the fantasy market was for black people. And it's still popular because there are so many black comics on crowdfunding right now making good money and basically building an audience. And with Ryan Coogler's Sinners, again, here we have a horror movie made by a black director, revolving around black culture, revolving around a predominantly black cast, and again, highest grossing original movie since inception. And I don't see the studio execs going out here looking to rush to greenlight new material like An Eternal Night, which basically would be a story that, again, just like Sinners, again, follows similar themes. You would think you'd be rushing to run and go out here and get that type of story, rushing to run this, to get this, because this is how you make profits at the box office. This is how you make your money. And again, make your money by getting in on the ground floor of a popular genre. That's what studio execs used to do in the 70s all the way up until about the period of the social justice era. When they saw something was hot, they basically, again, jumped in and started saying, we got to greenlight more material. We got to start greenlighting material that's going to make us some money. We got to start greenlighting material that's going to pull in the box office. Unfortunately, with today's studio executives, again, many of them are inexperienced because they're coming from Silicon Valley. Others are coming in from the corporate America, but they still participate in the same anti-black racism that many in Hollywood did in the late 1960s and 1970s, when they were hesitant to go out here and again make films until they saw the success of the late Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass song. And that's when they decided, hey, we'll start making films. We'll start making these films because the black audience is there. And that's how we got the blaxploitation era that basically saved Hollywood. Before we got films like The Godfather and many of the other films that basically brought Hollywood back through the new Hollywood era. And sadly, what's happening here is that Hollywood basically, again, is these days, unlike the executives of old, basically is refusing to admit that the way you get the audience back to the theater is through the black community. Because when in the 70s, that's how you got the audience back. You got it because the black community basically brought the audience back. I mean, most of the studios started making their money on films after Sweet Sweetback. There was Shaft and all these other movies that featured predominantly black cast, even though Shaft was written by a white man. But the thing that is keeping them from doing this now is that they don't want to give, again, black creators credit, and they don't want black creators to get credit. And since they don't want black creators to get credit, this is what's keeping them from being able to reach this new audience. And basically, this is why film is basically dying at this point. Now, James Gunn basically said film was dying because of there being no good screenplays and them not finishing screenplays. And I'll agree with him on that point. But we clearly see that the executives also don't have the vision to see where the audience is going. Now, again, as someone who studied the entertainment industry, I look at the box office of Sinners, and as I look at that box office of Sinners, I clearly see where the trend is going, and the trend has been going this way since 2018. Now, back in 2018, it was clear to me that, again, there was a fantasy market, again, with for properties that featured black characters. There was a fantasy market there right now, ready to go. Again, all you had to do was contact black creators, make them a deal as related to their film rights, make them a deal as related to getting their properties out there, pay them to write the screenplay, and you would basically be able to print money on black fantasy. And when it comes to black horror, it's clear to me there's again a way to make money for the studios. Unfortunately, because many of the people running the studios are basically caught up in their racism, they're missing out on the dollars, refuting yet another narrative that was presented about film, where a lot of people who are in Hollywood who are black, what they say is, oh, there's no black and white, there's only green. But it's clear to me that it's not about green, because here's Sinners making the money, showing us where the green is, but because they don't want to deal with black people and give black people power in the entertainment business. This is why they don't want to go out here and contact people, again, who can give them the solution to their slumping box office. The solution to their slumping box office comes through the black community, but they don't want to go through the black community. No, they want to continue maintaining white supremacy at the box office, even though that's completely failed with agendas like their girl boss, which is basically white feminism, and trying to put the white woman in a masculine role is basically died at the box office. And many of their old aging franchises like Mission Impossible, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, those franchises have basically run their course, and they don't want to go out here and realize that, again, your road to success ran through the black community once in the 70s all the way up till now, because, again, one of the other reasons why we got that resurgence was because of the resurgence of black film from the blaxploitation era to Bill Cosby coming in and giving us the contemporary golden age of black films. And I mean, all of that was a gateway, again, done by black people. And it's clear to me that, again, that gateway, once again, is through the black community. But many of the sinners in Hollywood, the white supremacists, don't want to admit that Sinners is part of a trend that shows us that when it comes to entertainment, people want to see material made by black creators, but they don't want to give black creators those green lights because they don't want, again, the narrative to change regarding black people. No, when it comes to Hollywood, they want to continue staying on the road of these slave movies, stay on the road of these Tyler Perry dramas that basically show us nothing more than a struggle industrial complex. They want to maintain the struggle industrial complex that was created by Oprah Winfrey, Lee Daniels, Tyler Perry, and Curtis 50 Cent Jackson Esquire. They want to continue seeing images of black people in misery and suffering, and they don't want to see images of black empowerment, which is what you would get from creators like myself in genres like horror and fantasy. Moreover, they don't want black people to start imagining themselves as a part of a larger world. They don't want to see black people starting to imagine themselves in a world where there are more ideas about who you can be. No, they want to keep you in that black box that's acceptable to white people that I talked about in my novel Spellbound, keep you in a world of stereotypes. They don't want you to see yourself as a human person like we did in periods where there were doors opened by people like Bill Cosby. They don't want you to see that richer world, but in order for Hollywood to get rich again, they're going to have to open those doors, and that's something that they don't want to do, and that's shown to me by the success of Sinners, in that they don't want to further build and expand on the progress that this film has made. They don't want to further build on that progress and open up this entire genre of horror to black people and open up the genre of fantasy to black people so that we can start seeing stories in horror and fantasy from a black perspective. Now, if you want to check out a story that's just like Sinners, you can pick up my vampire novel, Eternal Night, and you can find that book in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, along with other books in the SJS Direct universe, such as the ISIS series, the Esteem series, and the John Haynes series, where I do horror stories like ISIS Night of the Vampires, ISIS Bride of Dracula, and ISIS Escape from Transylvania. I have lots of great stories in the horror genre, like Esteem Horror in the Hamptons, and all of those stories are available again in paperback on Amazon.com, and you can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me talk more about black fantasy and black science fiction, and the entire comic book genre, because I also have a comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, which is available on Lulu.com right now. Again, if you want to see me talk more about this and continue to make more projects like I do on my SJS Direct imprint, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Bride of Dracula. The goddess next door and John Haynes team up to take on the dark vampire in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get ISIS, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-reader at online booksellers today. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. ISIS, Escape from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.